Well, and those who are coming in now, please introduce yourself shortly in the chat so we know who is in the audience. That would be nice. Thank you. Well, my name is Arja. I am almost stepping down from the ICOM Netherlands board, but it's an honor to be to host this session for you. And we are going we have many guest speakers. We have even 5 guest speakers, and we are most proud that they are willing to share their experience about dealing with decoloniality with us. And as stated in the invitation, there's often a lot of concepts around dealing with decoloniality, but what does it mean in practice? So we are eager to hear some examples and some experiences so we can learn from their experience over many places and a lot of time. And I'm just introducing the first speaker to you, part of this coalition, the International Coalition of the Sites of Conscience, and they will hand over to each other for when they are changing speakers. So the first one is Parusha, if I pronounce it correctly, and she is communications manager in the coalition. So please, Parusha, take the floor.
Thank you so
well,
much.
maybe just sorry, I forget the practical announcements I was going to make, or I should keep the order, of course. This talk is being recorded, as you might have noticed when entering the screen. And it will probably already tomorrow be published on our website. And please have a look on our website and look in the archives, because all those ICOM talks have been extremely interesting and relevant, and it is great that we can still see them even if you are not making it to join the live version. You can still learn a lot from the old recordings too. So please check the website, or if you want to see it twice after being here today. This talk is interactive, so that's why we are not talking to you, but we're also expecting your contributions later. And that's why we have a Zoom meeting this time and not a conference. So everybody can speak, but please keep your mic off during the presentations. And after that, we will ask you to post your questions in the chat, and the speakers will be able to react on your questions and answer them. So please keep your questions for yourself now. Take some notes so that you're ready to post your questions in the chat later. So we will have about a little hour for the presentations, and then we have about half an hour to exchange ideas and questions. So please, Parusha, go ahead.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining our session today, and a big thank you to ICOM Netherlands for inviting us. Milo, I think we can go ahead and start sharing the presentation on your screen, if that's possible.
Yes, I will go and start it.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. So while we wait for that to come up, just a quick round of introductions. My name is Parusha, and I am joined by my colleagues Justine de Mayo and Elena Del Hoyo from the International Coalition of Sites of Conscience. And we are also joined today by our colleague from Illinois State Museum, which is a member of the International Coalition of Sites of Conscience. And representing Illinois State Museum is Dr. Jen Edgington, the museum director, as well as their community partner, Jose Burgos, who is the Chief External Affairs Officer at Illinois Department of Natural Resources. We really are viewing this as a learning community opportunity. And so, as said, we look forward to engaging with all of you, but we also recognize that there's a lot of knowledge and practice in the room today. And so we hope that there can be further exchanges between all of us after our talk today. You can go on to the next slide. Okay, so as you all know, today we'll be delving into the subject of practicing decoloniality in museums. And to illustrate the practicalities and methods as well as challenges around this pertinent area, we will be drawing on the work of members. And that is quite central to a lot of the work that we do at ICSC because we are member-centered. We'll begin with framing how practicing decoloniality translates to the work of Sites of Conscience members, and then move on to methods and approaches, where you will also hear from Illinois State Museum's experience under a project that we led called Addressing the Silences. After this, we will discuss the ongoing challenges we have observed in this work, as well as tools to respond to arising challenges. Finally, we will end with some time for questions and reflections from all of you. I do think someone needs to put themselves on mute, so I'm just going to flag that. Right, so before we get into the content, for those of you who don't know us, the International Coalition of Sites of Conscience was founded as a global member network in 1999. And since its founding, ICSC has galvanized a dynamic movement to preserve, document, and share stories of the past to build more just and peaceful presents as well as futures. As a global network of sites of conscience, our members include over 400 museums, historic sites, archives, and memory initiatives in over 80 countries. The work of our members is very diverse, but some of the key principles of the work include serving as trusted community platforms for truth-telling, facilitating healing and collective memory processes, promoting inclusive and values-based narratives, fostering democracy and social transformation, as well as galvanizing an intergenerational movement for memory and historical preservation. We can go to the next slide. As the convener of our network, we work with members through a combination of capacity building, advocacy, as well as peer support and learning. We help members develop their sites as it relates to various aspects of the mission, including recognizing power of place in convening communities, advocating for reparative justice through symbolic and material acts, facilitating dialogue as a pathway to community rebuilding, as well as creating spaces for historically marginalized and silenced populations to be able to leverage storytelling to include a multitude of voices and perspectives, and promoting civic engagement through collective actions. We are always welcoming new members to join our global network, and we will provide a bit more information about how to do that close to the end of the session, as well as other ways that you can work with us. One important thing to note is that we have members that are both part of ICOM as well as ICSC, and ICSC is an affiliate organization of ICOM, and we have worked closely with ICOM through various initiatives and collaborations, so it's certainly a relationship that we value. One of the initiatives that we collaborated with ICOM on was ICOM's decolonization working group. Where we differ from ICOM is that ICSC's membership does expand beyond museums, and many of our members include survivor and victim-led organizations, as well as memorial parks and digital memory initiatives. So many of our members also go beyond more traditional brick-and-mortar museums. Membership is based across the world with regional networks in MENA, Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, as well as North America and Europe. At the heart of our membership work is the belief that our power is in our diversity and in cultivating interpersonal relationships. And we believe that our strength as a global network is in our membership base. As it becomes clearer that we are living in a moment of polycrises, where multiple interconnected crises converge and amplify each other, we believe we're in a critical position as a membership network to respond to these different situations because of our holistic approach to memory, heritage, and social justice. So that is a bit of background to us. We'll now delve a bit more deeper into our work and how it relates to decolonization. So I'll hand off to my colleague, Elena.
Thank you. So let's begin with the topic of today. You can go to the next slide, please. Thank you so much. So, as you all know, colonialism was not just a historical policy concerning the domination of territories and their peoples, it also included racial and racist ideologies to legitimize such domination. And this included the suppression of aspects of identity such as language and tradition, and the propaganda of a Western system of knowledge. Because of that, coloniality, which are the practices and power structures of colonialism, survived colonialism in many forms that we can observe today, enduring systems of power and institutional racism, persistent discrimination based on race and social hierarchies, and the marginalization of indigenous cultures and knowledge. Coloniality is also cemented into the very foundation of the museum, as we all know, linked in origin to the exploitation of living beings and resources, theories of racial evolution, and notions of civilizing the lower classes. And moreover, many collections, museums, buildings, and even older exhibitions are direct material remnants from the colonial era. If we can go to the next slide. Thank you. But while decolonizing the museum is often equated with the restitution of objects, this is only a small part of the broader effort to unroot the colonial structures embedded in these institutions. For sites of conscience, decolonization is an ongoing and deliberate process aimed at dismantling the entrenched systemic inequalities and biases that have historically shaped these institutions. We can go to the next slide. So now I will provide some examples of how sites of conscience globally practice decoloniality through these four pillars: challenging dominant historical narratives, amplifying marginalized voices, knowledge, and agency, redressing historical injustices, and decolonizing institutional practices. Next slide, please. So, many museum, historical sites, and institutions have traditionally reflected colonial or dominant perspectives, often marginalizing or erasing the voices of those who were colonized. And here is a photo of Nahem Shoa's exhibition Into the Light at Liverpool's Worker Art Gallery, one of the museums of the National Museums Liverpool, a member site in the UK. This painting is one of Shoa's 6 contemporary portraits displayed besides famous artworks from the permanent collections. It serves as a powerful intervention to challenge colonial narratives in British art history, asking uncomfortable questions related to transatlantic slavery, Liverpool cotton industry, and the objectification in women in art, amongst many others. The exhibit urges the public to confront and revise the colonial legacies embedded in museums, and in this case, in the permanent exhibit. Next slide, please. But decolonization within sites of conscience, it's not only challenging these narratives, it also involves amplifying and activating stories, knowledge, and perspective that have been silenced or marginalized in these grand narratives. This is done by developing collaborative practice with communities, reclaiming their narratives, knowledge system, and heritage, and promoting their agency and self-representation. And this is a photo of the District 6 Museum in South Africa. Once a vibrant multicultural neighborhood in Cape Town, the District 6 was forcibly cleared under apartheid, and today the museum works to restore erased histories and affirm the agency of those displaced by centering their voices through oral histories, community-led exhibitions, and cultural programming. Next slide. Sites of conscience also confront historical injustices and their legacy through concrete reparative actions that go beyond symbolic acknowledgement. This includes exposing the legacies of colonialism, including how these stories continue to shape structural inequalities and social exclusion today, and supporting meaningful process of truth-telling, justice, and reparations. These are photos from the Woodland Cultural Centre, a site of conscience in Canada that serves to preserve, promote, and strengthen Indigenous language, culture, art, and history. The site was established upon the closure of a residential school where First Nation boys and girls were separated from their homes. And after the closure, Woodland began collecting research artifacts, and with over 50,000 objects, is one of the largest facilities in Canada managed directly by First Nations. The center plays a vital role in supporting reparative justice by also acknowledging the abuse endured by First Nation children and promotes the learning of Indigenous languages today. And next slide, please. Finally, genuinely building more inclusive narratives also requires a commitment to shifting power structures and rethinking museum practices that perpetuate exclusion. This is a photo of the Sao Paulo State Immigration Museum in Brazil. 3 years ago, we partnered with the museum and 5 other sites of conscience on the Correcting the Record project that you also have on screen. This project aimed to help museums and cultural institutions to engage in deep and honest self-assessment to determine gaps in community representation in all aspects of their work. And as part of the project, the museum identified that the migration narratives represented in the displays were biased towards the histories of European, Middle Eastern, and Asian immigrants and systematically omitted narratives of Afro-Brazilian and original peoples, understood today as narratives of forced migration. This bias stems from Brazil's colonial history and whitening policies, which played a major role in marginalizing Afro-Brazilian and indigenous communities. And through this project, the museum explored inclusive practices to engage these historically excluded groups and began to tell a more inclusive and complex story of migration, one that helps challenge ongoing discrimination and racism in Brazil society today. Now we will move on to the next section, and I'm giving the floor to Justine.
Thank you, Elena. Hi, everyone. So I will now present a bit the methodology developed and used by sites of conscience over the past 25 years, drawing on this deep knowledge and varied approach of our members. We have developed practical approaches and methods to help institutions put decolonial practices into action. I will just briefly present some of these approaches and methodology. Next slide, please. Thank you. So at the heart of the coalition work is a belief in the transformative power of narrative. The stories we tell about the past shape how communities understand the present and imagine the future. And here in the slide, I included the words of novelist and activist Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie about the power of narrative. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the coalition works toward decentering the narrative, meaning shifting the focus away from dominant or traditionally privileged perspectives and bring forward voices, experiences, and viewpoints that have been marginalized or excluded. The way a story is framed is never neutral. And next slide, please. Thank you. So it's never neutral. It always involves choices. The stories we choose to tell, the voice we amplify, the details we emphasize or omit, all reflect our values, perspectives, and priorities. Whether in museums, classrooms, journalism, or advocacy, storytelling shapes how people understand the world. And it can either reinforce existing power structures or challenge them. It can silence certain experiences or amplify them. It can perpetuate injustice or create space for truth-telling, healing, and accountability. So to frame a story responsibly, we use to critically examine its context through 4 key lenses that you can see on this slide. First, the voice. Who is telling the story? What perspective is being centered and which ones are left out? Second, the scope. What are the boundaries of the story? When and where does it take place? What's considered relevant or irrelevant? Centrality. Within those boundaries, whose experiences are foregrounded, who is visible, and who remains in the background? And lastly, agency. Who is shown as having power or influence? Who is acted upon and who acts. And each of these choices shape not just the story, but how audiences understand reality itself. And next slide, please. So I just included here a few questions to consider when we tell a story. So who voices are included or excluded in your exhibits, programs, or public messaging? Which communities or perspectives are vital for presenting a more complete, inclusive, or truthful version of history at your site, at your museum? And how might the visitor experience shift if these voices, boundaries, or narrative choices were reconsidered or rebalanced? So these are a few questions that you can consider when telling a story in your museum. Next slide, please. Practicing decoloniality, as you saw in the examples of sites of conscience work that Elena shared, also means building inclusive and complex narratives by amplifying marginalized stories, knowledge, and perspectives. ICSC works with its members and partners to gather new stories through storytelling. Next slide, please. Those stories are grounded in lived experiences. And this approach shifts power, affirms identity, reflects complexity, agency, and nuance. It is important to tell stories from different angles, not solely through the lens of the victim oppressor relationships. And this builds a more just and inclusive understanding of the past and the present. And here in the slide on the left, you can see a photo of the World Childhood Museum collection in Sarajevo. The museum houses a unique and powerful collection centered on the experiences of children affected by war. And through personal artifacts, photographs, letters, and testimonies, the museum preserves and shares the stories of childhood during conflict, focusing on resilience, loss, and hope. And so these are very personal objects that those children shared to the museum. But when engaging with storytelling, it's also important to adopt ethical practices and be mindful of the risk of re-traumatization. And in that regard, we support our members to create safe and trauma-sensitive spaces where people are supported to express themselves. And here you can see on this slide two photos of the work we do with our members to create those safe and trauma-sensitive spaces where people are supported to express themselves. These are examples of art-based approaches that we use, especially with victims and survivors. In the middle, it's a photo of a body mapping workshop we did in Sri Lanka. And on the right is chairs that have been painted by relatives of missing people in Lebanon as part of the project, empty chairs waiting families. And just a few words about the picture in the middle, which is this technique of body mapping, which is a method for trauma healing and storytelling that we have been using with diverse groups such as HIV positive women in Kenya, war survivors in Sudan, Liberia, and Bosnia. Next slide, please. Thank you. And here again, I included some guiding questions to help you reflect on how inclusivity is approached at your museum. Those questions you can ask yourselves, are we truly inclusive of diverse voices and identities? Do we actively foster an environment where diversity can thrive? What barriers, visible or invisible, might prevent certain groups from participating or feeling represented? Next slide, please. Genuinely practicing decoloniality means challenging the structures that determine who has the power to tell stories and shifting that power. It requires a commitment to shifting power structures and rethinking practices that perpetuate exclusion. It requires moving from telling stories about communities to telling stories with and by them. Shifting power structures begins with building equitable and reciprocal relationships. True partnerships aren't extractive, they are collaborative. We use frameworks such as the 7 ingredients of equitable collaboration and the Later Guide to ensure mutual benefits and shared ownership. Next slide, please. So just presenting very briefly here the ladder of participation to ensure we move towards meaningful partnerships. So this ladder helps evaluate how inclusive our practices really are. It's about turning one-off participation into sustained engagement. It's moving from consultation to co-creation, from being invited to the table to helping design the table itself. So this is one of the tools we use to ensure meaningful partnership with communities. As we can see through these different methods and tools that I briefly presented, engaging in decolonization process requires museums to critically reassess their missions, confront exclusion within the narrative and practices, and build new relationships with their communities. And this process requires profound institutional transformation. Transformation seen as a continuous, intentional process that involves questioning existing norms and reassessing practices. And here I hand it over to Parusha.
Thanks, Justine. So this is just a quick slide that shows those 7 ingredients of reciprocal relationship building, which you can all take a quick look at. And then I think, Mayo, if we can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is the part I'm most excited about because you're all going to be hearing from Illinois State Museum. But as a base background to it, to support and build on a lot of the ideas that Justine has spoken about, ICSC developed a learning cohort program specifically designed for museum professionals titled Addressing Silences. The program supported 13 Sites of Conscience members and 13 community partners across the United States, and through a combination of capacity building workshops, peer exchanges, and the piloting of inclusive strategies, the program encouraged internal transformation, helping museums to tell inclusive stories and remain relevant, trusted institutions that truly reflect and serve the diversity of their communities. With ICSC's guidance, participants work together to reflect on the gaps and absences within their institutional narratives and practices, to rethink the audiences and revisit their missions, as well as think through how they could effectively serve their communities. This also included identifying the voices, experiences, and perspectives that have been marginalized or excluded, and a large component focused on collaboration with community partners in thinking through the design and carrying out of pilot projects. And all of this culminated in the ability to test new inclusive and participatory practices, as well as laying the foundation for broader long-term institutional change. So I'm going to now hand over to Jen and Jose, who took part in this project, and they'll be sharing about their experience and the work that they did together.
Thank you. So I'm Jen Edgington. I'm the museum director of the Illinois State Museum, and we're really excited, Jose and myself, are really excited to talk about the work that we did with some youth in Central Illinois. So next slide. So just to give you some example, you probably have never been to the Illinois State Museum or heard of it. So we are a museum system of currently 4 sites, but as of July 1, we are getting 56 more. The historic sites are coming under us. We are a state organization. So the governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, is our boss. And we have to adhere to governmental laws as it pertains to the state. Our museum that you see here is our flagship museum in Springfield, Illinois. It's in central Illinois, surrounded by cornfields for as far as the eye can see. We are located 3 hours driving from Chicago and about an hour and a half from St. Louis, which are our closest cities. We are located right in the heart of Springfield, and the Capitol building is just on the other side of this 1960s wonder that you see in front of you. And so ISM is nearly 150 years old. We are 2 years away from being 150, which is one of the older museums in the Midwest. Here, we actually have 11.8 million objects that tell the story of Illinois. So we focus on history, art, and science. We don't just pick one, we do them all. And then we are also part of the Department of Natural Resources, which is where Jose will come in and he can talk a little bit more about that. So when we entered this project, we felt really lucky because we really had a catalyst of change in 2019 and 2020. We had a new director who really wanted to focus on decolonization. Her name was Cinnamon Leggetko, and she was pretty known around the United States for her work with Indigenous communities and prioritizing. Unfortunately, since then, Cinnamon has passed. So I have stepped up in her place, and we've really worked to how do we change the Illinois State Museum to make sure we are telling everyone's stories in the state. We recognize, like many American museums, that we had commissions, which means we relied on stereotypes to talk about different communities and cultures, including Native American. And we also had a mission. Some stories were completely missing when I started at the museum. And so we really needed to flip the way that we did business to ensure that we were working in community with community to tell their own story authentically and appropriately. And this project was one of the ways that we did that. So if you can go to the next slide. So just so you are aware, we actually recently changed our mission. Before, it was very focused on collections. People aspect, not really included until the second half. So we've changed our mission to really celebrate stories. So our mission now is the Illinois State Museum is dedicated to sharing Illinois stories, honoring its cultural and natural resources, and inspiring our future. So we're really looking at making it a people-first institution and rooting ourselves in our decolonizing work as well as inclusive practices. Our vision is the Illinois State Museum will connect the world to the dynamic story of Illinois and inspire all to learn and share their experience, which I hope I'm doing today with being here with all of you. All right, so next slide, please, and thank you. So when we were reached out by the coalition, we didn't really know who to work with. Being in Illinois, it's about 7 hours driving from the very tippy top to the bottom of Illinois. So we have quite the population. And we had already started working with different tribal nations who called Illinois home, but no longer were there. We started working with the local African American and Black communities to tell their story, but there was something missing. And that was kind of this rural immigrant story. And we worked together with Jose Burgos to really identify who we could potentially work with. As someone who is a second generation Mexican American, I recognize that my story and stories of my grandma being a Mexican in the Midwest are not told very much around here. So we wanted to flip that narrative. There are roughly 2.3 million individuals living in Illinois right now who identify as Latino, Latinx, Latina, or Hispanic. So we recognized that that was a big hole in the stories we were telling. So we found this amazing youth Spanish club that we wanted to work with. And Beardstown is located about an hour away from Springfield. even further away from Chicago. And they are really founded on the Illinois River, and it is because there is a pork processing plant that actually pulls from other countries. So Beardstown is very uniquely situated with multiple languages being spoken in this teeny tiny rural town. And a lot of the immigrants or first generation that are coming there are from Latin American communities. So we really wanted to work with Gabrielle Montoya, who is the teacher, and you can see her in the middle on some of these pictures, and her students in the Spanish club, which is an optional club after school. So next slide, and I'm going to hand it over to Jose.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you so much. So as Jen said, I am the Chief External Affairs Officer for the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, and that means that the mission that we have here at this department is to protect and promote Illinois natural resources. We do that by promoting our state parks and asking people to spend more time in the outdoors. But we also have a cultural portion of what we do, and that's where the Illinois State Museum and Historic Sites play a big role. And in my position, my goal was to first identify a group, as Jen said, that we thought could help us tell the story in a way that was authentic. So in order to do that, we connected with Gabriela. I'm a former high school teacher, so it was easy for me to make the connection. I thought when we work with the youth, if we identify a good teacher, a teacher with passion that students respect, then I think we can begin the work. So we went to Beardstown several times before we agreed to start working. We knew that we couldn't build the relationship overnight, but we showed up and we agreed to start working, at least to start the process of getting to know each other. So next slide, please. So we started meeting with them regularly, and the end result, and this is a slide that will make more sense at the end of it, because this is them already working. This is them in the classroom. This is 2025. We're meeting twice a month at their school every month, and their relationship has now been strengthened, is developed, and now they can become historians for us. They have collected objects, they have collected stories at this point. So what you see there is the result of what I'm about to show you now on how we build trust. So if you don't mind going to the next slide. So building trust. Now, why is it important for us as government to build trust? Because that's all we need to do as governmental agencies. We need to make sure that our citizens in Illinois trust the government and they know that we're here to improve their lives and find ways for them to feel that in this state they can achieve what they want to achieve. It sounds idealistic, but Jen mentioned Governor Pritzker earlier, and I think we have the right leader and the right team to make this a reality in the state of Illinois, despite the fact that we understand that the United States as a whole is highly divided. We know that. So how do we do this? First of all, in 2023, so next slide, please. What we did was we invited them into our space. So now we have talked to the teacher. We have agreed that we're going to work together. We're going to start the process. So they came to the museum. For many of them, it was the very first time they visited a museum. So the difference was that we didn't say, hey, this is going to be just a visit. No. This is an invitation. So Jen and her team, the experts at the Illinois State Museum, put together activities. The kids got to learn about objects and how to describe them. And we had a full day of activities in which they were really considering for the first time what would happen if a museum starts telling stories with the youth in mind. So that was the first visit. We have plenty of pictures, but we have a limited amount of time. So next slide, please. So in 2024 was the year when we said, okay, now we know who they are. They know who we are. They know we care. We have an initial relationship. So what we did next is that we showed up at their festival. So we knew, and I knew this because of Jen's expertise, that decolonial practice doesn't stay in institutional walls. So we meet them where they were. We said, you know what? We're going to show up at your annual festival. So what we did, we brought our tents, we invited other governmental agencies, and we enjoyed, along the students, live music, amazing and delicious food, face painting, all of the things that make a festival a celebration. And the good thing was that because of sites of conscience, because of the support that we received, we were able to give them the resources to make their own festival a reality in their own terms. It was the very first time Jen and myself also realized the leadership skills that these kids have naturally. They're sons and daughters of immigrants, so they're resilient. They're seeking their place in the world. So when you ignite their passion, they respond immediately. So next slide, please. Then we took him to a place that has complex indigenous history. This is Dixon Mounds. So we actually asked them to come with us to this place to have conversations that are uncomfortable, and we were able to stay there, to begin these hard conversations in which we need to acknowledge that just like Native Americans, just like many immigrant communities, we haven't found our place in museums. So we had the conversations, and the discomfort that we felt then turned into more trust. Now they knew that they could say what they wanted to say, which, by the way, started the day they visited the museum, because they gave us some really harsh criticism. They didn't think it was a lot of fun. So they said, we need to make this thing a little better, put some QR codes here, integrate some technology, because it's a little boring. And it was hard for us to hear it, but it was very refreshing, because that's when you can, if we have the necessary humility to serve, then that's a guide. Now we know. So next slide, please. So then we invited them to spend time in nature with us. Now, I said earlier, I'm the person responsible to promote this message that nature heals, that nature is good for you, that our kids are spending too much time in this virtual world that at times makes them feel disconnected to nature. We came out of this world. Humans came out of this world, and particularly we can say that I'm from Latin America. I was born and raised in Chile, and I was born and raised in the Bio region, influenced by the Mapuche culture. As some of you know, Mapu stands for land and Che stands for people. Mapuche means people of the land. So for me to be in a position where now I'm helping this generation remind themselves of the importance of spending time in nature, that was only better for the relationship that we're trying to build. They know that this isn't just about museum and using them to become historians for a little while, and then off they go, and all of us feel good about something that is temporary. No, this is deep, because as we were taking nature walks, we were talking about life, about dreams, about the fact that they want to go to college, but they don't have transportation, about the fact that they need money. All of that helps. Trust is built precisely in discomfort. So we got to talk about mental health. We brought them here in May, so that's Mental Health Awareness Month. So we continue to develop the relationship that then, next slide, got us to this point where we are now. So the kids are building the exhibit. Can you go to the next slide, please? And this is what happened last month. It was wonderful, extraordinary. The students, which at this point we have selected 7 officials, correct? 6 student officials. So we started inviting everyone in the Spanish club with obviously the partnership we had with Gabriela. But as we got closer to the exhibit, we identified 6 official students who, in the literal sense, became historians. They conducted interviews across the community. They interviewed themselves. They interviewed their relatives. They interviewed people in Beerstown because they saw this as an opportunity to share something that they thought was important to them and hence important to their community. So they began building the exhibit. Can we go to the next slide? Because that's Helen, the first one who showed up early. Now we have the rest. We have Darío, we have Dalina, we have Camila. Now they're putting it together. The ISM, the Illinois State Museum team, came up with the concept, the kids came up with, and with the help of the curators, we replicated their classroom there. And that work, the kids now can see it, they can touch it, they can, as I said, they're now inside of our museum building it. So next slide, please. So you see there, Alex is one of the Illinois State Museum team members. You see Wes in the back. They're now the kids consulting with them. Okay, what do I put in my locker? Because now we have decided, or all of us together decided that the best way to summarize or encapsulate their story, at least so it can permanently be at the Illinois State Museum, is through the lockers, which is very iconic in the United States. I said I come from Chile. In Latin American, we don't have lockers. That's an American thing. You come to the United States and then you hear, wing, and then the lockers and everyone is, we don't have that, but the idea of using this symbol to say, my house is your house, which is what the name of the exhibit is now officially established. Mi casa, tu casa. My house is your house. They came here just like I did 23 years ago with dreams. And dreams that will be realized if people like Jen, like myself, and the people and the team at ISM, and the leadership, and the governor, and those of us here in Illinois who care about the state, we can help them. And that's why when Jen said, Jose, we have this project with the international side of conscious, and it sounded all good. And then we looked at the depth, and we said, okay, there's depth here, because you better believe that these students are going to be talking to Jen, to myself, and everyone involved in this project for years to come. We have established that relationship now, and it's genuine and it's authentic. So next slide, please, because I want to show you the final product. So right now, if you go to the Illinois State Museum, there's a place where we have the sign, it's behind glass, so it looks so neat and so cool, so official. And they're saying, this is us. Estos somos nosotros. And I'll stop here, Jen, and I would like you to close this using all the expert terms to explain exactly what took place here. But thank you so much. Jen, your turn.
I'll go very quickly. One of the things I just want to mention is in the United States, often the default is English, right? And so we actually had a conversation with the students on what language they preferred us to have the labels in first. And I remember I said, we can do Spanish first, and we discussed what that meant, right? Whose stories we were privileging, who we were saying the space was for. We had one student cry and say that she's never been asked that before in her entire academic career in the United States. And after we made the decision, the teacher pulled me aside and said, can you do that? And I said, yep, I'm the director. So using my privilege in my position to be able to make that decision, I think really helped show these students we're here for them. We care deeply. And this is the start. We actually have a larger temporary exhibit. This is permanent now at the museum. And we have a temporary exhibit working with the kids. So they're here every other week at the museum and making the space theirs. Thank you for letting us share. We are around to continue, but I want to turn it back over.
Thank you, Jen and Jose. And Jen, I'm gonna hand back to you in a couple of minutes just to talk about some challenges, because I think that that's also important to it. Mayo, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so I think all of us can agree that practicing decoloniality comes with many challenges, including discomfort and resistance to new narratives. So we can go to the next slide. And one of the most persistent challenges that I'm sure many of you have observed is visitor discomfort and resistance when confronted with stories that challenge long-held assumptions and dominant narratives of historical interpretation. And this resistance arises from various factors. And what we've seen through the work of Sites of Conscience is that resistance is often emotional because we're confronting injustice, privilege, and complicity. People often feel deeply uncomfortable or threatened because it touches on their personal and national identity. But that's not reason to stop doing decoloniality work. There's also the fear of backlash, and I think this is a very real fear that goes quite deep into thinking about who are the audiences that you may alienate or who are the political interests that you may be upsetting. And so it's definitely not one to make a small deal out of, but again, something that should not stop us as we move towards decolonial practices. And then the last is that staff aren't always prepared, and this really ties into the wider mission of a museum or a site of memory in terms of how we are equipping the frontline staff to be able to be prepared to address any microaggressions or confrontational remarks that can arise. And one way that we often think about this is around dialogue, which Justine will speak about in a bit. Next slide, please. A large portion of the work is also around the internal transformation of what this means to an organization or an institution. Just to highlight a couple before I hand off to Jen to speak about some of the challenges that ISM was able to observe. We often see that there's institutional inertia where there's a hope that business as usual can continue, and the idea of disrupting hierarchies and routines is seen as a threat. There is often also a fear internally from staff that their place within the hierarchy is going to be disrupted because of there being shifts in power and questioning around the wider operations of an institution. I think it's very clear from Jose and Jen's discussion that when we speak about decolonization, it's not simply about an exhibition that gets put up, or it's not simply about what happens within the museum walls, but really a wider question of what are the languages that are being spoken, or who are the people that are being represented. And this can often be seen as an attack for some people. Part of, as I've mentioned, external pressures, so political forces, funders, influential supporters that often make huge donations to museums often have a lot of resistance to the decolonial project. And then I think two parts that come together quite often is this thing of symbolic versus substantive change and tokenism, where we see that there may be some cosmetic changes that happen, where you see some kind of diverse imagery on brochures, but when you look deeper at the exhibition content, this doesn't translate. And without addressing these deeper structural inequalities, we can see that these changes don't go beyond surface level and are really risking to actually reinforce the very system that is being critiqued. So Jen, maybe just for a couple of minutes, if you'd like to share a bit more about the challenges that you observed through this process and more widely within the work that ICOM was doing even before this.
Absolutely. I think in particular with this project and a lot of our other programs that are rooted in Latin culture, the physical geographical location being so close to the state capital, which is seen as this power, place, is one that's really challenging because some people may not feel safe being in a place that's so visible to government in general. They might be undocumented. They might have bad experience with the law or government. So the physical location of our museum can be a challenge to get in everyone to tell their own story. And that's why we pivoted and made sure that we met our community where they were, made sure that they felt comfortable. Another huge one when we started, and this is obviously before we had this trust built, was a language barrier. So because of assimilation of, you know, my grandma and then my mother and then to me, my ability to speak Spanish has been lost, right? So I can understand it. I'm just not as comfortable speaking it. And so the students would have to use Jose as a translator when we first started meeting. They didn't feel safe talking to me in English. They were worried that I wouldn't be able to understand them. And then there was this beautiful moment where actually this pivoted, and one of the students who was featured in the photos, he took the lead as the translator. And so he's now working with us to make sure everyone's voices are heard. But on top of it, me and the staff that are involved on the museum side, we are actively taking lessons on our own time to continue our communication with the students, because we want them to feel that we're here for them, and they do. But with that, we've also recognized the museum needs to really change how we do business. So now we are doing bilingual labels, bilingual experiences, and moving away from that just English kind of narrative. So there's been multiple changes in that regard. And I think another just kind of big one that you mentioned was that external pressure and misunderstanding and misconception, right? So I brought this up. We have a friends group that supports the museum. I brought up this project to them, and it was pushed back. Well, why aren't you working with this community? Why aren't you working with that community? And they really miss the intersectionality of these young people and bringing all of their identities to the table. So I think that continuing our own edification and making sure that we teach those who come into our museum why we're doing this work, why this work matters, and why all of our personalities, identities, everything should be welcome at the Illinois State Museum, I think is important. And that's a continued effort of training staff, training the visitors that come through the door, but also allowing some room to mess up, but also fix those. So we practice truth-telling and transparency at the Illinois State Museum, and that has helped us grow as an organization.
Thank you. Justine, I think you will be taking us through the last section.
Thank you. Many thanks, Jane, for sharing those challenges and the strategies you put in place to mitigate those challenges. I will just present a few tools that we use to respond to some of the challenges that Parusha mentioned. Which is first internal and external resistance. Next slide, please. What we learned is that we need to start with small-scale experiments or pilot initiatives, which is exactly what Jane and Jose did with their very successful initiative. These serve as a valuable opportunities to create a learning environment that encourages collective experimentation and empowers individuals to take initiative. Through these early efforts, you can build momentum and expand upon what works well. And prototyping is particularly effective method for testing new ideas. It allows you to try out different approaches, whether it's a new narrative you want to share at your site, updated signal or labels, a participatory activity, a new program or event, or a new exhibit. Prototyping helps you move beyond theoretical planning by grounding your efforts in real-world feedback. And rather than making changes in isolation, prototyping invites input from the very people you aim to serve. This collaborative process not only leads to more effective and impactful solutions, but also gives participants a sense of ownership and agency in shaping the outcomes. And Jose and Jane beautifully exemplify that with their initiative. Next slide, please. But challenging dominant narratives around complex and divisive historical or current social issues often leads to discomfort and resistance, as Parusha and Jane mentioned. And here we learned that taking a dialogic approach can help promote critical thinking and build mutual understanding. And dialogue is a very powerful interpretative technique, one that goes beyond debate or persuasion. Unlike discussion formats that focus on winning arguments or presenting fixed positions, dialogue seeks to foster both personal and collective learning. It transforms discomfort or resistance into opportunities for deeper understanding and connection. Dialogue is about sharing ideas, information, experiences, and assumption for the purpose of personal and collective learning. We all have something to learn from each other, including our visitors learning from one another. And our role as museum is to enable that shared learning together through dialogic interpretation. As I said, it's one of the most powerful types of dialogue because we are able to combine participants' personal experiences with the power of place-based learning and the content at a specific place. So next slide, please. Dialogue assumes there are different ways of knowing about the world, and all are important to building understanding. This foundational perspective in our approach to dialogue draws from the concept of the four truths, which originated from the South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The idea emerged through the experiences of those who were engaged in deep listening during the Commission hearings. And through that listening, they realized that there was not only different narratives, not only multiple points of view, but within individuals, there were multiple ways of thinking of an historical event. So these four truths are the forensic truths, which are the data, measurable, and other information that are considered verifiable facts. The personal truths, which are the first-hand or lived experiences of people. If you didn't experience an event yourself, it is how and who you learn about it from. The social truths are the big stories or narratives that hold power within society. These often explain why events happened. There are often multiple social truths held about something at the same time. No social truth is believed by everyone in a society. Some are simply not true, but they are believed by a lot of people. And the last truth is reconciliatory truth, and it's how an individual or community comes to terms with a perceived injustice. So the four truths exercise that we use helps open up meaningful conversation by creating a safe and respectful space where people can share their experiences, express their individual truths, and listen to others. One way to structure this process is through the arc of dialogue, which unfolds in four phases designed to gradually build trust. So in that exercise that we use, the conversation begins with the sharing of personal truths, then move into social truths, followed by reconciliatory truths. And underpinning all this is a forensic truth, providing a factual foundation throughout the dialogue. So this is one of the tool of the method that we use at the coalition in order to engage dialogue, especially when confronting dissonant heritage, difficult truths. Next slide, please. And the last main learning that I would like to share is that building meaningful and lasting relationships with communities requires museums to embrace vulnerability and let go of some control. And here again, Jose and Jen beautifully express that through their experience. It's important to trust your community, believe in the knowledge, experiences, and capacity of the community to shape meaningful change. And these involve more than just opening the door. It means, as Jose was saying, meeting the community where the community is. It's about creating space for genuine participation, where voices are truly heard. Practicing decoloniality also requires a balance of honesty and care. It means telling difficult truths, not shedding away from these difficult truths, but fostering an environment where discomfort can lead to growth, not harm. As I was saying, the goal is not to avoid hard conversation, but to navigate them with empathy, humility, and purpose, ensuring that everyone feels safe, seen, and valued in the process. So these are some of the methods and tools that we use to mitigate the challenges that Parusha and Jen mentioned. Elena, I hand it over to you.
Yes. If we can go over the next slide, please. Thank you so much. So as my colleagues have expressed through our methodology and also practical examples, over the years, Sites of Conscience has accumulated experience working with institutions and communities aiming for social transformation, and we love to have as many voices as possible at the table. If interested, you can work or collaborate with us in many different ways, from becoming a member to using our consultancy services to becoming a partner. In terms of membership, ICSC, as Parusha said at the beginning, has more than 400 members in more than 80 countries. And our members range from activist or victim-based grassroots organization to national museums and memorials. And the coalition oversees 5 regional networks and provides opportunity for programmatic global exchange. By becoming a member, you receive individual one-on-one support as needed, and regional and global program exchange and advocacy opportunities to nurture the memory movement all around the world. Membership fees are due annually, and we do use a scaling system based on your operational budget. So if any of you are interested, please contact us and we will send you the paperwork. You can also contact us to get a sense of our consulting services. We work with organizations and institutions globally to build the knowledge, capacity, and confidence of practitioners and institutions to engage in inclusive and community-centered practices around justice, public memory, restorative practices, and documentation, among many others. We do that by designing tailored engagement and consultancies that prioritize context-specific solutions to every challenge, from shorter sessions such as online or in-person trainings or webinars aimed at developing or expanding specific skill sets and knowledge areas, to long-term engagements focusing on holistic institutional transformation, such as deep dive trainings that are online or in person, strategic planning, needs assessment, community consultations, and our cohort model, in which we work with groups of interested museums for a longer time on all of the above. Finally, if you have any idea you would like to work with us on or a project in mind, just please reach out to us. We strongly believe in the power of collaboration and partnership to strengthen our shared goals and vision. It has been a pleasure. And if we can move to the next slide, if anyone has any question, we are here for you.
Thank you so much,